So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of our biweekly webinar series. I'm Dr. George Ozude of Time Health Capital, and with Bayo Fasanya of Dr. Breathe Easy Capital, we are your hosts. This evening, we're excited to bring on Matt Temple of NHK Capital Partners and Moussa Ndiaye of CMB Regional Partners. So a little bit about NHK Capital Partners is a private equity and private lending firm with over 30 years of experience. They've worked with over 6,000 high net worth clients in over 100 countries. And about CMB Regional Centers, it's directly affiliated with NHK and is one of the most successful regional centers in the EB5 Investor Visa Program, which we will learn about this evening. CMB has successfully underwritten, placed, and managed over $3.1 billion in EB5 investment capital in more than 70 EB5 investment partners. With more than 70 EB5 investment partners. I have known Matt and Moussa for several years. I've known NHK and CMB through some family members and am an investor in a couple of their development deals in Texas. So I'm really excited to bring them on tonight and learn this nuanced way of investing. So with that, I'll kick it over to Moussa to start off with the EB5 program.
All right, thank you so much, George, for this introduction. As George said, my name is Moussa. I've been in the EB5 business for quite some time. So I've been dealing with the EB5 for the past 8 years. I'm a director of investor relations at CMB Regional Centers. I've assisted hundreds of EB5 investors in their journey from start to finish, from beginning of the program until return of capital, and then some of them are currently US citizen. So it's a pleasure to be part of this event. So I'm going to get my PowerPoint running. Just a second here. All right, so we will go through the basics of the EB5. I will try to explain the EB5, the requirements, the way it goes from the beginning till the current status of the EB5 program as we are right now. The EB5 has been created back in 1990 by the US Congress. It's called the Immigration Employment-Based Fifth Preference. And the primary goal is to assist high net worth individuals who are interested into getting the permanent residency in the United States for themselves and their family, i.e. their spouse and any kids under the age of 21. They will all be able to benefit from this program and move into the United States and get all the rights of the US citizen except the right to vote until they become a US citizen, which will get them that. The requirements to invest in the EB5 is to actually make a capital investment of $800,000 if your project is located in what we call a targeted employment area, which is a rural area or an area of high unemployment rate. I'll go through more details into that. The investment must create at least 10 new American jobs and maintain those jobs for a period of 2 years. Every year, there's 10,000 visas issued every year, and it's based on allocation to each country. Each country receives 7%, which is around 700 visas. If you're from India, India gets 700 visas. From Nigeria, it gets 700 visas. So each visa is the primary applicant plus any derivatives. So that's the way that it is processed, and it's administered by the US Citizenship and Immigration Services. As I said, you need to make an investment into a new business, a new entity, a new commercial entity. The investment must create 10 new American jobs. And yes, it's an investment at risk. There's no guarantee into the investment, but doesn't mean that the investment must be risky. So at CMB, we try to mitigate the risk as much as possible so that the individual is not going to be dealing with. We set up an entity, the individual makes an investment into that entity. That entity is going to be lending capital to the job creation entity, which is the target investment, for a period of 6 years. Once the money is utilized, and then through refinancing, sale of the asset, or through operations, if there is enough capital, it's a loan. When the capital is back to the partnership that lent it to that entity, we will be able to return it to the investors. And we have done full circle several times, and we'll be able to get more details to that also. As you see here, the investment process starts at the investment, which is when the individual locate the project that they have decided to invest into. Then they decide to make the due diligence that is necessary to see if the project is viable, hire an immigration attorney. If they want to hire any other advisors, they can go ahead and do. But mostly it's going to be the regional center and the immigration attorneys that will be helping the individual in their immigration process. At CMB, we are in charge of the business side of the program, which is the job creation, finding the best suitable project that has one requirement, which is to help the individual get the permanent residency. The attorney will work with the individual in getting all the documentation that they need to get the proper source of funds. Because if the source of funds is not clear, or if they have any, if the USCIS has any doubt, they will issue what we call a request for evidence. The individual must show that the money came from legitimate source, and then the USCIS will be able to approve their petition. Once they file the petition, the USCIS adjudicate the process. The current processing time is around, I would say, an average of 3.5 to 4 years. Right now, it's getting a little bit longer due to the fact that the USCIS has taken 2 years with COVID, and the program was at standby at some period. And that has created a certain backlog that this current administration is trying to get through. But at some point, they will go back to the typical processing time that we're used to, which is around 2 years or less. Once the individual's petition is approved, the individual is invited to the US consulate to apply for their visa. So the USCIS, once they're done and in the process, they will send the petition to the National Visa Center, which is part of the Department of State. The Department of State will do a criminal background check on the individual to see if this individual has any criminal background or has done any issues with any legal issues. Once the individual is cleared, they will invite them to the US consulate to get their visa issued. So the NVC approves the gentleman, but then once they go to the consulate, it's just to get their visa issued. They will get a 6 months visa to enter the United States. The date of entry will be what we call the beginning of the conditional residency. They will get a 2 years conditional residency, and it's a green card, but it's just valid for 2 years. 3 months prior to the expiration of that green card, they will file for what we call the IA-29 petition to remove the condition of the green card and make it permanent. As soon as they file the petition, they will receive an extension of 24 to 48 months on their residency. USCIS can collect the green card, give them a letter, give them a stamp in their passport, which will be valid for 48 months. So whenever they enter the United States, they just show that and they have free access to the US. They will still be considered legal permanent resident, but they still don't have the card yet. Once the petition is approved, then if they get to 5 years of residency since the time that they entered the US, they're eligible to apply for US citizenship. So this is probably, I would say, the clearest way to go from a foreigner to a US citizen, and yourself, your spouse, and any kids under 21 will be able to benefit from it if you're able to afford it. We'll get into the requirements of the EB5 and how much it costs. Targeted employment area, as I explained earlier, is an area which is either rural or high unemployment area. A rural area is defined as an area of less than 20,000 residents. And a high unemployment area is an area in which the unemployment rate is 150% above the national rate. If the project is located in either of those areas, then it's at the lowest investment threshold, which is $800,000 instead of $1,050,000. I would say majority of the current EB5 offerings into the market or that are in the $800,000 threshold. At CMB, we have done the high one. We have done it in 2 partnerships, and both were successful. One was the group 12, if I'm not mistaken. It was in San Francisco, and the other one was in San Francisco. It was with Hillwood Development, and both of them were really successful. But the majority of our offerings are actually at the lowest investment threshold. Back it was at 500,000 and now at 800,000. CMB was created by Mr. Patrick Hogan, who is still the CEO of CMB Regional Centers. And Patrick Hogan got involved into the EB5 back in 1994. And in 1997, he created the CMB Regional Centers. So CMB Regional Center has been running ever since. He started with a company called CMB Export, which is still running in California. It's the regional center that has the geographical scope of California and one county in Nevada. And we have done several projects in California. We started at the Norton Air Force Base. So CMB stands for Close Military Bases. Patrick Hogan was in the Navy, and back in the 90s, they were closing several military bases, and the government decided to close the Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, and he saw an opportunity to bring back jobs in that area. So with the investment of several individuals, we were able to create more than 10,000 jobs in that area by having logistic facilities built for Amazon, for Pepsi, for Kohl's, and several other entities in that area. And the former airport is now being utilized by FedEx. So we helped really develop that area. And there are more jobs in that area right now than it was with the Air Force Base. At CMB, we have assisted over 6,000 individuals from all around the world, from actually 103 countries, who have made an EB5 investment. Out of them, 5,100 have reached the level of I-526 approvals. If you remember, if I explained earlier, the I-526 is the first petition that the individual will file, which is a combination of the project that they have invested into, plus the source of funds. So 5,100 plus of our investors have already reached that milestone, and their petition is still pending. Some of them are currently, the remaining have their petition pending. Among the 5,100, some are still in their country waiting for their visa. Some are in the United States waiting for adjustment of status. Others have received their visa. And I think we are close to 4,000 individuals who have received their visa and currently living in the United States. Out of the ones that have received their visa and have sustained their conditional residency, we have over 2,200 of them that have received their I-829 petitions, which means that they are currently permanent resident of the United States, and several of them are also US citizen. They have gotten to that level and apply for the US citizenship, and we've returned the capital to over 2,000 investors to date. Actually, I think I've mixed up a little bit these numbers. It's 2,200 investors that have received their capital back and over 2,000 that have received their I-829 petition. We have more that have received their capital back because of the fact that as soon as they're sustained their residency, which is as soon as they're done with the 2 years conditional residency, if funds is available from the partnership that they have invested into, they're eligible to get their money back. They don't have to wait until the approval of their permanent residency. So while the petition is being processed, they can have their money back and remain into the United States and use their capital. Some of our investors in NHK actually are from individuals who have done EB5 with us, received their capital back, and with the trust that they have, they are invested with NHK, which is an affiliate of CMB Regional Centers. As you can see here, we manage 16 regional centers that are spread around the United States and Hawaii. We have CMB Texas, in which we have done several projects, and our headquarters is located in Dallas, Texas. We have another office in Rock Island, Illinois, and we also have a regional center in Illinois. We used to be the regional center of the state of Iowa, but since that regional center wasn't that much active, we decided to close it. But we still have a county in Iowa and in Omaha, which has one of our projects called Group 47, which is a hotel in Omaha. In California, as you can see, we have done several projects in that area, and we actually started in California. Most of our earliest projects were around this area in San Bernardino, Group A, Group B, Group 1, 2, majority of them were in that area. In here, we have Group 32, which is one of our first rural project that we have done, which was an ethanol refinery plant in the state of North Dakota. And it's a great success, and that project was a great success. Capital was back, investors have received their money back. CMB has raised over 3.1 billion, as George mentioned, from foreign nationals from 103 countries around the world. And we have assisted in 80 different EB5 offerings in different type of offerings in housing, real estate development, hotel development. We have done a lot of logistic facilities. A lot of the logistic facilities that we have done have been leased by Amazon, PepsiCo, Coles. We're currently doing one, which is the biggest one that we have done today, which is a 5 million square foot building in Daytona, Florida. And that one has already a lease in place with Amazon has signed a lease for, I believe, 20 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew. And the lease is supposed to kick off in August of this year. So the purpose of the EB5 is pretty straightforward, is to get the green card, which is the first place for yourself and your family. Second is to get the return of your principal investment, which is the $800,000 if the investment is located in a TEA area, or $1,050,000 if the project is located in a non-TEA area, and a slight return on investment. But I would say the focus must not be on this one, the return on investment, because what you're getting as a resident of the United States is actually what I would say the return on investment. I usually go with the example of one of my clients who's from Nigeria. He has 7 kids. So when he did the EB5 back in 2015 with me, he told his oldest child to just wait a little bit and before going to school in the University of Oklahoma for petroleum engineering. So he decided to wait for 1 year. Once they got their visa, moved to the United States, his tuition went from $90,000 to $30,000 a year. So he made a lot of saving in that, which is what I would say his return on investment mostly. And his other kids, the second one was passionate in football and got a scholarship. His daughter is in law school. And so he made a lot of saving because if he was to spend all that money on international tuition fee, he would be spending a lot of money. And now that all of his kids are in school as domestic, he's making huge savings. And his son, who is in Oklahoma, has graduated now and is working in Houston, Texas. So it's a great success. And the gentleman has also received his money back and live down in Katy. So he's always a nice guy and he's always welcome. If I wanted to introduce someone, I use him as someone that actually who has gone full circle, know the EB5, the in and out, and is the best one that you can see, has seen it all and be successful on the green card, the return of investment and return on investment. So the way that CMB set about projects is pretty straightforward. The focus is on the job creation and the safety of the investment. Because if there's no job creation, there's no immigration benefit. The USCIS will simply deny the petition of the individual if there is not enough job creation in this investment. So when the investors reviewing our offerings, we set up a limited partnership. So all of our projects start with Group 84, for example, and then that's the target investment. The Group 84 is a partnership that the individual is going to be making the investment into, which is a new commercial entity. And the new commercial entity is going to be making a loan to the job creation entity, which is the target investment. The loan is for 6 years. The developer will be using the capital. And once they get to the 6 year, the maturity rate date, they have to return the capital back to the partnership. The partnership gets back the capital and is able to return the funds back to the investors. That's the way that we do it. And we've been very successful doing it that way. So we haven't changed our structure ever since. All of our projects share a similar structure. CMB, we have staff of around 50 individuals that are spread around the world that from different origin. Myself, I'm from Senegal, born and raised. We have Vitali, for example, who's from Eastern Europe. He is the director of that market. We have Wilson Jiang, who's based in China, assists investors that actually are still in China or have any question, any issues that they have in China. He's the one that is there. When it comes to return of capital, he's also the guy who is the foot on the ground in that market and contacts those individuals. Roshan is from India. Kiman is from Vietnam. We have Kenny, who is also from Taiwan. And we also have a Latin market individuals. We have people from Mexico. Diana, for example, is based in Mexico, and Carlos also is in the Latin market and assists several individuals in those places. And at CMB since 2015, we're the first regional center that decided that we are going to audit all of our information. So we just don't want to put any track record out in the public and don't have anything to show that, okay, this is pretty accurate. We have all of the information that we put out have been audited. Every year we send our records to BKD. So whenever we have an investor who receive an approval of anything, I-526 or IA-29, we ask them to provide us a copy because we need that for our records and for our audit. All of the numbers that we give out in terms of our track record have actually been audited by BKD, and we have those information available if any prospective investors is interested in reviewing them. So in terms of we currently have 2 partnerships that are open for subscription. I'm just going to be doing a quick rundown of these because I'm almost in the 20 minutes mark. So Group 84, as I said, is a logistic facility that is based out in Daytona, Florida. This is a development that is almost complete. Completion is targeted for the 3rd quarter of this year. Amazon has already signed a lease for 20 years in this building. Once construction is complete, we also have a company called Spectre or something like that, that has decided to purchase the facility, and they have already have a purchase agreement with Hillwood in place. As soon as the building is complete, they will execute this. They will hopefully buy the building. They already have $70 million committed into this facility as part of the capital stack, which is the whole project is, I would say, is one of the best one that we have put together, safety and all around.
It's called a forward sale. So it's a forward sale with the future buyer. So even though it's still under development and the lease is executed, once there's CO, Amazon takes control of the building, then it's a forward sale and that transaction has been occurred. So that's I think the word you're looking for.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you very much for that. We are raising for 99 units. So 99 investors can invest into this one. We already have provided the capital that they needed through the bridge loan. And then once we get the investors in, we will just be able to pull our investment back. The other projects that we have, Group 83 is located in San Francisco. Soma Hayward, it's condominium development in San Francisco. So this one is also under construction and will be completed back in 2025. So this one is going to be for 60 some investors, if I'm not mistaken, and the raise is ongoing. I would say probably this one will be fully subscribed soon. Maybe in the next couple of months or 3 months, we will be completing the raise on this one. And we have other projects in the pipeline that will be available soon if anybody is interested into knowing more about them. The developer for both of these partnership is Hillwood Development, which is a capital company based in Dallas, Texas, belongs to the Perot family. It was created by Ross Perot Jr., the son of Ross Perot Sr., who passed away 2 years ago, who was candidate in the US election back into the 90s. So the Republican says that he's the reason why George Bush Sr. actually lost the election to Clinton back into the 90s, because a lot of individuals loved him. And he is to date the only individual has actually been in the US debate as the first time that they had a debate with 3 primary candidates, an independent, Republican, and Democrat. So Hillwood is a great company. They are all around the United States, and I would say they're the leader in terms of this type of development and part of the top 10 US developers, real estate developers, and they have foot on the ground in the US and international. They have offices in Europe and in America, and they have done several type of development, not only in logistic facilities, but they also do real estate. We have done several projects with them in terms of housing development, but the focus with them were mostly into the horizontal development, and then they sell those lots to builders who comes and build the houses for the buyers. We have done a total of 36 partnerships with Hillwood, but just so you know, a partnership can contain 2 to 3 different projects. So in terms of projects with Hillwood, we are probably over 100 projects, and 28 of those partnerships have received I-526 and I-924 or I-924 approval. The I-526 is the individual's approval. The I-924 is the partnership's approval. And 11 of those partnerships have received investors with their permanent residency issued, which is the I-829, and Hillwood has already repaid 20 of their loans. So please let me know if you
Awesome.
have any questions.
Thank you, Moussa.
Yep.
I appreciate that. That was really intriguing information. I'm sure maybe kind of news to many of us here. So I would invite anyone who has a question to leave it in the chat. We'll be looking at the chat to call out your questions. You can also come off mute and come on camera if you wanted to ask questions. I had a question. I can kick things off. I had a question about the loan itself. Obviously, there's a lot of value, like you mentioned, in obtaining the pathway to citizenship. You mentioned there is some return that does come on top of the original principal or capital invested. Do the investors get an idea of what that looks like, or?
Yeah, the partnerships gets 1% return per annum, but the return to the partnership is divided between the general partner and the limited partner. The limited partner gets 0.3% and the GP gets 0.7%. The 0.7% is actually going to be used as the partnership's expenses and every charges that we have. Matthew is more into project development, so he knows the details about this. But I would say there's not much in terms of return on investment into our offerings. We focus on the safety of the investment and getting the individuals the jobs that they need to get their residency in place.
Yeah, and to spread a little bit more light on that, so whenever we go out and we secure our loan, it's actually a mezzanine loan. So we have a senior lender that's superior to us, and we have intercreditor agreements with them. But what we also want as that security for that job creation, because the way that the investors are able to secure that green card is to show proof they've gotten the job creation, which is through the construction being completed of the project. So what we have is a completion guarantee with the developer. Whether it's Hillwood or any other developer that we work with. But our mezzanine loan, depending on the project and the borrower's wherewithal, typically it's a 7% loan. Right now, I just use that number as a ballpark. Of that 7%, as Moussa mentioned, 1% is then sent down to the partnership, where 0.7% of that is then gone to the GP to pay for expenses. 0.3% of that is actually distributed. So the amount that goes to the investors is very minimal. And really the primary goal to this investment is not financial goal, it's the green card itself. We have, like Moussa mentioned, all the individuals that are on ground in CMB and internationally, but we have a team that's 4 times as large that's actually in the US. Our project development team, our investor relations teams, our in-house legal. We have all these expenses where that loan is what is taken care of to make sure that we can continue to support our payroll, support our operations, not only domestically, but foreign. But again, to answer your question, investors' return is very minimal.
Sure.
I have a question, and a great presentation, Moussa, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to benefit from this if they have a high income earner. So one of it is the fact that it's the barrier, obviously, is the high investment that needs to be done. So like $800,000. So is there any other way around it? Does it have to be like family income, or how does it matter how they get the 800,000? Because I know you said like proof of funds, like how they get the funds.
Yeah, as long as the individual can show that the funds came from legitimate source, they can get a loan, and that's the most the requirements. The primary requirements for USCIS is to show that money came from legitimate source. That's it. If it's their income, business people, or if they get a loan. Even at CMB, we have an affiliate entity that also provides loans to individuals. If they have a minimum of $450,000, we can provide them a loan up to $350,000, payable quarterly and for a maximum term of 2 years, with a 7% interest rate.
So, yeah, and also we see a lot of individuals that are family members that maybe have a nephew, niece, or a family member that They want to move to the US, they want to start a career path in the US. And if their family member gifts them the full 800,000, that's also a way of providing a valid source of funds, as long as we can validate that source of funds from the family that's gifting it. So there's a lot of ways to come up with funds. It's just working with your immigration attorney to make sure that all of that is clean and it's accountable, so that when the USCIS asks questions, you can show all the paperwork. Hey, this came from the sale of my house in India or China. Here's proof of the purchase back in 2003. I've owned it for 10 years. Questions like that, and that's how you can provide that evidence.
Oh, I had another. Oh yeah, Adiola, go for it.
Hi, thank you for hosting this, and thank you, Moussa. I liked your presentation. For the where the TEA, do people who do the EB5, do they have to live in that rural area?
So the EB5 has an advantage. It doesn't mean that when you invest into a project, that you have to live in that area. So it's federal. Immigration is federal. So you can live anywhere that you want. You can live in Texas and your project can be in California or in New York. So
Okay.
you don't have to live in that area.
Okay, great.
Which
Thank
is
you.
different if it was an E2 visa. If it was an E2 visa, for example, you'll have to live in the area that your project is located into.
All right. What's an E2 visa?
E2 is an investment visa, but it's not a permanent residency. So it's just a visa. It's when the country of the individual has a treaty with the United States. For example, you're Nigerian, right?
Yes.
Okay, unfortunately, Nigeria doesn't have an E2 treaty with the United States. So it's only with countries that have a treaty with the United States that can benefit from that visa. But yes, it's a visa. It's kind of like a non-immigrant long-term visa, but it's not a residency. It doesn't lead to US permanent residency.
Okay. All right. Thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome. Take care.
I had another question about how the government monitors the job creation you mentioned, especially because you said if they don't have evidence of those actual minimum 10 jobs creation, they can withhold the visa. How do they go about surveilling this, monitoring it? What are they looking for?
So the I-829 petition is when the individual shows the job creation. The individual is not the one that actually does the work of collecting the jobs. So we have our project team that gets quarterly update and follows and for example, when we have an agreement with an entity, with a developer to finance their project, we set up. We don't just give them the funds. So we give them the funds through a draw request. And that allows us to know and see where the money is going through. And we have different ways of kind of determining the jobs that are created into this project. We have direct jobs, indirect jobs, and induced jobs. The direct jobs are the individual working into the project itself. We can capture those jobs if the project lasts 2 years, because that's the job creation timeline. If we don't need the direct job, our focus is actually mostly onto the indirect jobs, which is the capital expenditure. So when we're doing a project, the capital expenditure is determined and we know exactly where the money is going into. Anything that is going into if the acquisition of a land, for example, on a real estate development doesn't create jobs. But if we're building houses, for example, if we're buying the steel from the United States, if we finish the houses, if we're buying the carpet from the US, any material that we buy from the US qualified as jobs. And each $1 million spent in certain areas in the US have numbers of jobs that are allocated. I believe in California, for example, if you spend $1 million in qualified expenditure, it's around 7 point something jobs per $1 million spent. So based on that, we can determine the numbers of jobs that will be created in each development before we even put it into the market.
Yeah, to even elaborate more, we have an econ team, and what we do is we get the budget from our developer and we get a GMP or some kind of final construction budget contract. And we take that contract, we put it into a model, it's called RIMS 2, and it's an approved model that you throw all these expenditures. Our econ team then it grabs out what is considered qualified. So whether it's construction, laborers that build the construction, purchasing the materials, renting the machines. And what happens is we look at the budget, and this is a final budget, it's contracted, and we then spit out a number that says this construction alone is going to create this many jobs. And then what we do is we can then provide evidence to the USCIS, hey, we have a business plan. We're going to bring in this many investors. because we know it's going to create this many jobs. We're going to have a surplus because we always want there to be a little bit of extra in case the budget comes under the cost. So we provide that, and the USCIS looks at the model and says, okay, that's correct. Your business plan's great. Okay, if now fast forward through the development, you had to complete the project. And where I mentioned, we have certain pieces in place that reduce our risk, having a completion guarantee. If a developer, the costs balloon and they walk away and then the construction doesn't happen, they're going to get denied because they're dependent on that job creation from the completion of the entire project. So once the job's created 2 years later, what we do is we have the developer submit all the invoices, all the draw requests, all the backing documents. It's thousands and thousands of pages. And we take that and we bundle it and say, hey, USCIS, here's all the evidence that here's the CO, the construction is complete. The job creation, which we said in the business plan, was actually matched. It was actually right on budget. Then they review it. They send someone typically from the USCIS, an auditor, to the site. They say, oh, there's a building here. Yes, it's done. And then they approve that petition depending on where that person's from and their timeline. That's how they verify that the job creation has occurred.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And we have a question from Kashal Patel. So do we have any administrative fee other than the 800,000 investment and attorney fees? Yes, so CMB charges a syndication fee of $70,000 on top of the $800,000. So our total subscription price is $870,000. In terms of attorney fees, we can introduce you to immigration attorneys, but they each have their own fees. And also you will have government fees in terms of petitions, because each petition have their own fee. The I-526 is $3,675, and the I-829 petition, I believe, is $3,750. Also, in terms of government fees, the USCIS is considering increasing their fee, and the proposal for the I-526 is to raise it to $11,400.
I'm going to piggyback on that. So in terms of taxes,
okay,
I know we have to consult the CPA. Do you have cross-border accountants that you work with? Like the return that they make, how do they pay the taxes both in the US and in the country of origin?
So every year we have K1s that we issue out to investors. If the individual is actually still in their home country, we do the withholding necessary, so they don't have to have any headache in terms of their taxes. We issue them the remaining of any profit that they will be making after doing the withholding. So every year they will get their K1 showing that they have made the investment. And if the individual, however, gets to the I-526 petition approval and gets into the United States, then we will give them their full profit, their full earnings, and they will be working with CPAs in the United States to pay their taxes. Based on experience with the Nigerian market, I would say, as an example, I was able to kind of set up folks that can assist me. So I have a CPA back in Nigeria that helped me in terms of source of funds, helped some of my clients in terms of gathering the necessary documentation for the source of funds. He's a CPA, well experienced in the program, and him and I have been working for the past 8 years.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions, guys?
Okay. Yes, I wanted to know, how long does it take for someone to see the return on the return of their principal?
So our loans are set for 6 years. So okay, 6 years from the beginning of the process. It's 6 years from 6 months from the beginning of the raise, or 6 months or from the time of the project is closed. But from once we introduce the project into the market, 6 months from there, the project, the counts will start towards the maturity date. We'll set up the maturity date, and it's going to be 6 years.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Similar to that question, how long, and I think you actually mentioned this already when you put up the timeline, how long after they make the investment can they apply for the visa and even just literally set foot in the country? What does that timeline look like?
So the timeline is a little bit different, a little bit complex. So back into the, I'll go back a little bit far. Back in during the Obama era, it used to take around less than 12 months to get your petition approved, and you will get an appointment at the embassy within 6 to 9 months and be able to move to the US. So overall, within 2 years, the individual is physically into the United States. When we get into the Trump era, unfortunately, a lot of the staff of IPO, which is the Immigration Program Office, were moved into ICE, Immigration Custom Enforcement, which can reduce the processing, increase the processing time, because IPO, instead of processing over 1,000 cases per quarter, we're only processing around 250 cases per quarter. So that created a huge backlog. And then COVID came and the backlog increased because the USCIS office was closed. And in 2021, the EB5 program also was shut down for 8 months. So you'll see all that the time that the COVID time, the offices were closed. And then for 8 months, the program was shut down because there was an increase into the investment program. And then Congress didn't agree with it. In 2019, the investment was increased from $500,000 to $900,000. Then there was a lawsuit, and then the judge was in favor of the regional center that filed the lawsuit, and the program got back into $500,000. Then Congress decided to shut down the program so they can just make it better. And while they were doing it, it just like a lapse of 8 months that the program was not running and no petition was being processed. Once they reopened the program, given an extension of 5 years, the program that's when it was increased to $800,000. We started processing cases in March 2022. So we had that 2 years gap that no petition was being processed. Because of that, right now, the processing time is a little bit over 3 years. And once the individual get the I-526 approval, the consulate is a pretty fast one because it's NVC, National Visa Center, processing the case then, and USCIS send them the package, and then they will just request a police clearance of any country that the individual has been since their 16 years, since their 16th birthday. If they have spent 6 months in that country, they need police clearance of that country. Once they issue all those documents to the NVC will issue the approval, and then send the case to the US Embassy in the country of residence to the individual. Then they will be invited to come collect their visa. There will be an interview, but it's mostly just to know if they have some basic knowledge about the investment that they have done into the project that they have done. And then they will get issued 6 months visa, the individual, their spouse, and any kids under 21. But also the 21 age, when the individual makes an investment, the age of the child is locked. So they will freeze it. They will freeze it. If the kid is, for example, 20 years and 9 months, he will be 20 years and 9 months until the petition is approved. If it takes 5 years, he will be 20 years and 9 months. Once the petition is approved, a year later, that's when the counts towards their birthday will start again. So anybody who have their kids who's close to getting 21 can also be able to benefit from it.
Thank you. Anyone else with any other questions?
There is right now, Moussa, the rural aspect, which is a new set-aside visa, which the USCIS from the recent Integrity Act allows there to be potentially an expedite. They do say there's an expedited processing for anyone that invests into a rural. So they've actually taken rural and TEA recently and separated the two. And if you invest into a rural deal, there is the potential you can have expedited processing. We're still waiting to see if this is true. And I'm not too sure, Moose, if you have any feedback on that at all, if they've had any petitions approval yet for anyone that's invested in rural.
Yeah, so in with the new program, you have investment in rural, in infrastructure, and high unemployment. So if you invest in rural, you have 20, they said that your petition will be processed faster, but we still are yet to see a petition in rural area actually being approved. Investors have invested in some other regional centers who actually are rushing to get a rural project in the market. But at CMB, we're being conscious because, as I said, the rural area is an area of less than 20,000 residents. So if you're putting a project into a rural area, it has to be something that will be safe enough to return the capital back to the investors. So we just don't want to put a project in the middle of the corn farm or cornfield anywhere in the United States and just to call it a rural, just to benefit from that. We just want to have a project that is actually really well set and be able to give the investors the proper processing time and then benefit from their visa and get their money back. In terms of infrastructure also, if the project is located in infrastructure, there's 5% of the visas if the project is located into infrastructure that they said that they will expedite. And also 5% if the project is located into a high unemployment area, but with contiguous census tract. So group 84 actually qualifies for that because it's only 2 census tract, which is the location, the exact location of the project, but we are yet to see an expedited petition approved. So it's just USCIS. We're just waiting to see what will happen, but we have seen individuals making investment in rural area, but no approval, no expedite of petition that I'm aware of has been approved.
Great presentation, Moussa. Question: when they've achieved their green card, for example,
Yes.
do they have full capability of the green card? Or are there any limitations?
So the only limitation is the right to vote. That you have all the right of a US citizen, except that right.
Okay.
Until you become a US citizen, which is 5 years from the date of entry into the US. And if you were already in the US, for example, you do your adjustment of status as soon as your green card is issued, the 5-year counts begin at that time.
So it's basically like any other green card.
Yes,
So basically, you just can't vote.
exactly. Yeah.
I think green card also has like a limit of how long you can be outside the country. Is that not?
That's correct. So in terms of EB5 or any other green card, the main requirement is to actually maintain a residence in the United States. So you have to have an address in the US. So you either have to own a house or rent a place to show that, okay, this is my address. You cannot use a PO box. You have your address and also be in the US at least once every 6 months, because if you're not often in the US, if you go through the CBP, you can say you're not really a resident, and they can take you to an office to see exactly what's going on, because you're not supposed to be out of the US for more than 1 year if you say that you're a resident of the United States. So.
I also have one question. Have you ever had a situation where someone invested and then the program did not go through? So let's say a year or 2 years into the deal, somehow they couldn't get a green card. What happens to the money? What happens overall?
Yes, we have had investors that actually started the process and have received, unfortunately, a denial of their petition based on source of funds or any other thing, or criminal issues or anything. So the way that we have on our limited partnership agreement, there's 2 different denials. So there's an individual denial and a project denial. To date, since 1997, we haven't had a denial of a project that CMB has sponsored. Individuals, though, have received denial of their petition. Before USCIS issues a denial, they will send you a request for evidence into one specific area that they need clarity on. If the individual fails to respond to that, or they don't respond within the 90 days provided, USCIS will issue a NOID, a notice of intent to deny, and give them usually an additional 15 to 30 days. If they fail to answer, then the USCIS will issue a denial of their petition. If they did, once they deny, the petition is denied, the individual has the option of appealing that denial with their counsel. If they don't do that, or if they exhaust all avenues to overcome that denial, CMB will return their capital. We don't have a timeline as to when we will return the capital, but usually we will return the capital within 90 days, because going back into the way that we give the earnings to the investors, we don't give profits to the investors for the first 3 years of their investment, because we save that money in case of a denial of an individual. We can use that to pay the investors with a denial, and then there will be an excess when the repayment happens, or the repayment of the full capital, and then any losses that we experience with the repayment of that individual will be able to get that money back. Or if we don't have enough capital from that, we can ask the developer if they can make an early repayment on just that portion, If they cannot, the partnership can make a loan through a different partnership. So Matthew can give more details because he's in the project details. He's in the project department.
Yeah, and to answer your question, you got to take the return of capital immigration pull them apart. Because CMB, what we do is we act as the facility that allows you to invest into the JCE, so into a development. So we are strictly just the business side. The immigration side, you have to pull that apart because that's going to be the person filing this petition and the immigration attorney. So just because someone gets a denial on their personal side doesn't mean it affects their return of capital or affects the development at all. And they can have actually a very smooth individual process through the USCIS and their immigration, and it can have a hiccup in the project, whether it's CMB or any other regional centers. People have had problems where they don't get a full return of capital. At CMB, we've had one where we had to work out a deal through COVID and through some other problems and had to have a haircut. Some investors didn't get their full amount back. It's just what you deal with in the industry. But when you look at the two, they're totally separate. So if someone for some reason gets denied because the USCIS ultimately decides, hey, your source of funds aren't clean, then we receive that denial from the immigration attorney, and then we try to then act at our best to return the capital. There's no really true correlation between the two, a denial and then all of a sudden their funds disappear. They're truly investing into CMB and they have interest in our CMB partnership, so they're always obligated to that outside of their immigration benefit.
Okay.
Awesome. We are at the hour. I know we had Matt coming up with the NHK side.
Yeah,
but I think that would be a great opportunity maybe to bring you guys back. This has definitely been a lot of info and really good info. Does anyone have any other questions? Feel free to throw it in the chat. Otherwise, I definitely want to thank both Matt and Moussa for coming on. This has been really informative, I would say. Probably our most informative webinar. It's definitely a lot of info. Thank you guys. Just as a reminder, we have another webinar, our next webinar in 2 weeks. We have Bronson Hill coming on of Bronson Equity. We'll be talking about different ways physicians can be on the general partner side of these opportunities. Bronson has a lot of relationships with physicians. He's a former sales rep for a device company, so he works with a lot of physicians and high net worth individuals. So that's going to be coming up in the next 2 weeks. Other than that, I want to again thank both Matt and Moussa for coming on, NHK Capital Partners and CMB Regional Centers. Bio, do you have any other last comments or questions?
No, just wanted to thank everyone for coming. And every time we learn new things. And Matthew, we'll be sending an email just to get the other side from you.
Yeah, most definitely. We can always schedule that at a later date. No worries. I know CMB's priority. You guys are well connected with individuals that are probably working in the US on a visa and they're looking for this exact investment. It's very, very niche and unique. So I'm glad Moussa was able to explain it. And if anyone has any questions, you always can reach out to Moussa for further questions or clarification.
Awesome.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. It was definitely a pleasure talking to all of you. And if you have any questions about this program, let me know, and then we'll take it from there.
That's great. And that's actually a great segue. Is there any direct way they can reach you? Any email or website that's best? I'll put it up in the chat right here.
Yeah, I can actually just provide my information ASAP.
So we'll let that go up in the chat for a second. And other than that, we're going to let everyone go for the rest of their weekend. Thank you, everyone, for coming. There will be a recording of the webinar in a few days. If you have any questions, reach out to myself, Bio, and you have a direct access to Moussa.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.